Morning, everybody. So it's 9 o'clock, so let's get started on the webinar. This is Margot here from Bravo Pawn Systems, and I'd just like to thank each and every one of you for joining the webinar today. Besides providing our technology solution to help you run your business, we here at Bravo really believe that education is key to provide you all the tools that your shop needs for success. And that's why we've teamed up here with Tony Gallo of Sapphire Risk Advisory Group to present to you pawn shop security tips in today's webinar. I'm sure you've seen, heard, and talked with him at all the pawn conventions over the years, so you know that Tony Gallo is the man when it comes to security consulting in the pawn industry. With over his 30 years of experience in the security, audit, safety, and emergency management fields, Tony Gallo always has a lot of great information to share with pawnbrokers, so be sure to take notes. But we will be recording the webinar today so you can share it with your entire team later and for the others that weren't able to join the webinar. So also, if you have any questions, be sure to write them down and submit them in the chat section. Tony will be answering those at the end of his presentation. And you can also email your questions to Tony directly at the contact information provided on the screen, which is his email address. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tony. So let me just switch over to him, and he's going to be on the webcam. Just one sec. All right, Tony, I think you're good to go.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you very much for having me on today. I want to wish everyone a good morning. I hope everyone had a happy Halloween and didn't eat too much candy last night and wasn't scared by anybody. So a little bit about who I am. My name is Tony Gallo. I am the managing partner for Sapphire Risk Advisory Group. We are a security solutions company for the pawn industry. Prior to starting Sapphire about 4 years ago, I was the Director of Loss Prevention and Audit for a company called Easy Pawn, Easy Corp, and Value Pawn. I was the director for 18 years there and handled approximately 1,300 pawn shops and payday loan businesses in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. So I've been in the pawn industry about 22 years now. Worked with pawn customers across the United States from California all the way to New Jersey, down to Florida and so forth. A lot of you may have seen me at some of the pawn conferences throughout the years. So what we did is a little bit different than maybe some of the other webinars. We requested some questions to be sent to us that we're going to answer today. If we don't get to them all, we can do it at another webinar, or we can work with Margot and Bravo to answer them via email. So we have got about 12 questions we selected from the ones that we received. And I'm going to answer those questions now. And then if there's anything that comes up during that, please send me a message either in the chat or send me an email. And then we'll get to them. So let's start with that. And then we'll see where we go. So first question that came in is, why is pawn considered a more dangerous business? And if you look at the pawn industry over the years and the challenges that they have, think about what you actually do as a pawnbroker and what you actually have in your store. You advertise that you have a large amount of cash, that you're willing, that you can give cash to people. You advertise that you have jewelry, that you have gold. Some of you have firearms in your stores. Those are very desirable things that a bad person might want. It's something that they would be able to liquidate quickly out in the street. So your exposure is more significant than, say, a bicycle store or a sweater store, because what you have is something that can be converted into cash quite quickly. And we'll talk a little bit about cash as we go through the questions. So your exposure owning a pawn shop and running a pawn shop is a little bit more, say, than other locations. But the next question really dovetails right into that. And how does it compare to other retail verticals you consult with? So at Sapphire, we deal with primarily high-risk businesses. Our motto is we are a security solutions company, and our desire is to make a criminal's life more difficult. So when I talk about high risk, some of our clients are liquor stores, tobacco stores, convenience stores, firearm locations, legalized cannabis. And if you look at all of them, they have a very similar component compared to pawn, and that is they all have very desirable pieces of merchandise. They always have something of desire, and there's a perception that there's a lot of cash in that store. So when you look at high risk and we look at the security in the high risk industry, I talk to a lot of people in say, convenience stores who think they're very unique, or I'll talk to somebody in the tobacco industry who thinks they're very unique from crime, or pawn shop, or cannabis. You really aren't. It's very similar in a lot of ways because the bad guy is very similar in a lot of ways. So another question is, so when we talk about what's similar and how to reduce that kind of theft and exposure, the key is to reduce the perception that it's easy for someone to steal from your location. And you look at what you have in these similar high-risk businesses. You have gold, you have firearm, you have liquor, you have cigarettes, lottery tickets, cannabis at these locations. So you have a lot of things that mainstream society desires, more so than a one-off, like I said, a sweater or a bicycle or something to that nature. You can only sell so many bikes out on the street or tires compared to what you can sell if you had a bag of gold or diamonds or Rolex watches. So when you look at this industry and you look at the pawn industry and you look at the high-risk industry, there's a lot that you can learn from one industry to another as you continue to go forward. So what are basic steps that all pawn shop owners might have in place from day one? So a lot of times we'll deal with new pawn shop owners, someone who's getting into the business, someone who's going to be opening up their shop, or someone who has one location or several locations is now looking to open up a new one. The key to the very first day of any pawn shop location is to make sure you're developing what we call a culture of honesty. It's important to develop that culture of honesty because when you're dealing with the losses that occur in the store, what a lot of people don't take into consideration is that 50 to 70% of your losses come from internal problems. Whether that's an employee who is stealing from you, whether it's a disgruntled employee who not have your best interests at heart, you have to look at that situation and you have to address that. And how does a pawnbroker at their location develop what we, like I said, a culture of honesty? The factors that go into play that makes the employees that work there understand that no theft is going to be tolerated, makes the employees understand what the policies and procedures are going to be, makes the community, the customers that come into the store understand that this is an honest location, that there's no theft that's going to be allowed, and the perception of that is very important. So when we design a security program for a new pawn shop or for an existing pawn shop, we look at, does the store have that culture of honesty? Is it a store that invites people to steal, or is it a store that really sends that message that they do not want anyone stealing, that they will not tolerate anyone stealing? I learned this from reading a book about broken windows, and I talk about this a lot at seminars. And it goes true for any business. If you allow broken windows in your location, if you allow graffiti on your walls, if your parking lot is dirty, if your store floor is dirty, if your employees do not look presentable, what you're doing is you're sending a message to people that you really don't care about your location. More so, what that does to a dishonest person is they say, well, if they don't care, then I don't care, and they're going to wind up being more desirable to steal. One of the things, and I've referred to this, and again on some of my seminars, is I call it my bathroom theory. I've taken the broken theory and I moved it to kind of the bathroom, and that is, if I go to your location, one of the things I'll always do is I'll always use your restroom, a restroom kind of tells me the heart of the company. If it's clean, if it's organized, if it's presentable, I know that the store has taken some ownership to their store, and that in turn says a lot when it comes to keeping losses down. It doesn't have to be a Taj Mahal, but it has to appear that the store has some ownership. You know, when you walk down the aisle of your location, if you're a pawn owner, and you're walking down the loan section of your aisle, and there's a piece of paper, you're probably going to bend down and pick it up. But will all your employees bend down and pick it up? Will all your employees approach customers? Will they keep the store clean when you're not there? So that's how some of the steps of developing this culture of honesty, as we call it. And then the next thing, obviously, if you're opening up a store, is your physical security perception. Where are your cameras situated? Do you have what we call a public view monitor? If someone walks into your location, the very first thing they should see is themselves on film. You'll see it at a CVS, you'll see it at a Walgreens. Walmart has it. Most locations have adopted that over the years. And what that does is it sends a message to that person that there's a video system working in their store. You'd be surprised. I've seen people spend $40,000, $50,000 on a video system that I call them boat anchors, because they do nothing with the video system. There's no value to them whatsoever, other than the fact that they feel good and they can pat themselves on the back and say, look, I have a video system in my store. Well, yeah, but no one else knows you do. Or I've been to pawn shops where the pawn owner feels the need to hide cameras in a location. And my question is, well, why do you want to do that? And the answer is, well, we can catch people who are stealing. And I'm like, well, why do you want to catch people stealing? Wouldn't it be better if they just didn't steal and maybe went down to the other pawn shop and stole? So again, you have to look at your video system and make sure that you understand how that works. How does your alarm system work? Is there a panic button that can alert the police if something bad happens? Are they located where they need to be at the store? If you do not have a panic button, do employees know what their robbery awareness procedures should be? Do they have a buzzer at the front door? Do they know how that works? Can the person who's being buzzed in be buzzed out? What kind of safe are you using? Is it a TL rated safe? Is it a pawn guard safe or a pawn safe? Or is it a gun safe that's just storing expensive merchandise and it has no value whatsoever? So where are your safes located? What kind of access control restrictions? You know, I've been to some places that have had, they utilize thumbprints to get into the high-risk cage. I've seen some places that do not even have a high-risk cage, which is, you know, your decision. But what kind of access do people have? Does an employee have access to every location? Can you go into your gun room where the guns are stored, or only can certain people go into that location? The key really is, and what I'm trying to get across to any new pawnbroker or anyone who's opening up a new location, is what kind of message are you sending when you're there? Are you sending a message for them not to steal? Or are you sending a message that you really don't care whether they steal or not? I've been to locations where the feeling was, as long as they don't steal too much, they're okay with that. And you know, you have to decide if that's the kind of location you want to run. Another question is, what's the most common security mistake pawnbrokers make? Again, the most common mistake that I've seen, and I've seen it for 20-something years in the pawn industry, is what I call misplaced trust. You know, and that could be whether it's internal or external. You look at how a lot of losses occur. The significant losses, not someone who comes in and steals a screwdriver from the tool rack, but the $50,000 losses, the $100,000 losses. And one of the most common denominators that you always see in that is that there's a misplaced trust, whether that is because the people that work for you are family members or friends or they're longtime employees that have been at your location. After a while, you start to get a little relaxed about the policies and procedures. So the same employee counts the jewelry at night that counts the jewelry in the morning. So what? They've been there for years. Or someone is allowed to borrow a lawnmower because they have to mow their lawn over the weekend, or a TV because it's the Super Bowl. and they don't bring it back, because you trusted that they would, but you didn't really follow up that they would, or something like that. Or there's a feeling that people can take loans on Friday, I'm going to pay it back on Monday. And after a while, the policies and your procedures can break down, and that misplaced trust manifests itself quite rapidly. Uh, you know, uh, we do a lot of investigation. We'll come to a pawn shop, and that pawnbroker is just beside themselves because, that employee has been working for them for 10 years, 15 years, and all of a sudden now, they found out that there was theft going on. And why did that happen? Majority of the time, it's because the pawnbroker trained that person to steal. And when I say train that person to steal, is they allowed them to steal because they didn't have these checks and balances that they normally would have had that employee been someone they didn't know and someone that they hired off the street or never met before. So that's a serious security mistake we see all the time, is putting trust into people but not having that trust but verify factor involved. It doesn't help those people that you're putting the trust in. It doesn't send a message that we trust you and we feel that you're a part of our team, but we still have to run a business and we have to do things that are right. When you look at a dishonest activity that occurs, and again, majority of the losses in a pawn shop are dishonest activities, whether the pawnbroker wants to admit to it or not, they are. A lot of it comes down to one basic thing, and that is poor controls, poor activity. What are the follow-up mechanisms from the owners of the store? So let's move into another question. What are the most commonly stolen items in pawn shops and robberies? So the bottom line is, in a pawn shop, in most businesses, the end result for everybody is cash. Now, how does that manifest itself into cash? Well, first thing you can do is you can steal cash, and then you don't have to worry about that. But if you can't steal cash, the next thing you want to do is steal something that you can sell quickly off the street. So what is that? Jewelry, firearms, a tool, something of value that you can quickly convert over in a location. So when we talk about cash, one of the things that you need to look at as your location is, how much cash do you have in your front register? Do you have too much cash in your front register? I recommend that you keep $500 in your front register. A lot of people say, well, that's not enough money. Well, I don't know why that wouldn't be enough money, because if you're writing loans, you can always get more money out of the safe. You can take the excess cash, and I would recommend that you put it into a drop box right at the register. There's $400 safes that you can buy, put right at the register. I really don't care if you use a cigar box, as long as that money is out of the register. What does that do? Well, a couple of things. It sends a message to someone who's thinking of robbing your store that there's really not a lot of cash in the front register. Most robberies at a pawn shop, the person is only interested in your front register money. So they'll come in, they'll pull a gun, they'll ask for the money in the register, they're out of the store in less than 30 seconds. The majority of the robberies that you'll see across the United States happen like that way. So you want to keep the cash at a minimum, as low as you can. If you have to have $2,000 in your drawer to service your customers, then that's a decision you have to make. But there should be a maximum amount that you establish at your register in the front, and then anything remaining either gets dropped away in a drop safe, or gets pulled by the manager and put in the back main safe, or is put somewhere but out of the register drawer. You look at jewelry. In about 4 years now, maybe 5 years now, when gold prices continue to skyrocket, one of the ways that robbers are coming in is what's called a smash and grab. Come in, they'll smash a jewelry case. One guy will have special gloves on, construction gloves on, reach in, grab jewelry, and within 50 seconds to a minute, they're out, and you're short $50,000 worth of jewelry because they cleaned out that whole case. Some people have been moving to shatterproof glass, which I believe in, and we'll talk a little bit about that if we have time. But the thing about shatterproof glass is you need to make sure that it's being installed properly. A lot of times I'll go to a location and had a smash and grab, and they've had shatterproof glass, except they went down the block and they had the guy that did the window tint put in this shatterproof glass. The film that you can buy, 3M sells this. It's a 15 millimeter film that I would recommend, 12 to 15 millimeters, depending on what you want to do. But it has to be installed properly, which means that it has to cover the complete glass, not just to the edge. Because what happens is, if a bad guy comes in and they smash that glass, the edges are going to shatter and it's just going to fall down into the showcase, and it's not going to help at all. So you need to keep that in mind. You also need to keep in mind with any kind of a glass of that kind, if it works pretty much like a Kevlar vest would, a bulletproof vest would work. If you look at Kevlar, it's just a woven fabric. So it stops something round like a bullet would. But if someone had a knife, they could pierce through that fabric. Same thing with the film that you put on this glass. If you took a pickaxe, I can make a hole in that glass, and then I can pull the glass out. So you need to be very cognizant of the film. I think there's great value in it, but there are some limitations to that. And then you want to look at your safe. What kind of safe are you using? There's a safe, a pawn safe out there. If you haven't seen a pawn safe, I recommend that you look it up and do some research on it. If I could spend any amount of money, the very first thing I would buy is a pawn safe. Why? Because the most important thing you have is your loans. You can lose really almost everything else, but you can't lose your loans. And why are your loans important? I have insurance, so why do I have to worry about loans? I have 3 times the loan value of my insurance of my loans if I get robbed. So why do I have to worry about that? Because if you look at it, somewhere between 70 and 80% of the customers that have their jewelry loans stolen do not come back. So you may get reimbursed by your insurance company if someone stole your loans, but you're not going to get them back as a customer. 2 main reasons. First reason, they don't have any more jewelry to get loaned on. You're going to, they came in and they brought in an item and you've given them back $400 for the jewelry that was stolen. Now they have $400 in cash. Well, they're probably not going to buy another piece of jewelry. So they don't have anything to get a loan on anymore. So that's a percentage that doesn't come back. And the other percentage is they don't trust you anymore. I gave you the jewelry. You lost my jewelry. I don't really care how you lost my jewelry. So I'm going to go down to the block to the next pawn shop next time I have something alone. So keep that in mind. A lot of people have this misconception, I don't need a safe, or I don't have to worry about my safe, or my loans are secured because I'm in this room. If you lose your loans, you're losing your customers the majority of the time. So let's talk a little bit. Next question is, what about internal theft? So we talked about a little bit about internal theft and the concerns. And one of the big concerns, and the thing you have to always remember, like I said, cash is king. So when you look at how cash theft can manifest itself, it doesn't always appear as a shortage at the register. Very common way that an employee will steal is just not ring the sale at all. So person comes up, they want to buy an item, you tell them the price, they give you the cash, you don't ring the sale, or you pretend you ring the sale. You make the system, and you just don't ring the sale. How are you going to know that they didn't ring the sale? Well, next time you do an inventory. Well, look at that. I did an inventory, and I'm losing, this car stereo is missing. Well, someone must have shoplifted it. We have a shoplifting problem here. Well, you really didn't. You had someone who just didn't ring the sale and pocketed the money. Another common way is not ringing loan payouts. If you think about it, most customers really don't care whether you give them a receipt or not, but they're picking up their loan. They pay you the amount of money that they want, you give them their loan back, and they walk and they leave. Now, the problem that you always have to remember with that kind of situation, and how we get involved a lot, is that customer now comes back in and wants to get a loan on that item. And then the manager calls me and says, I don't know what happened, but the loan still shows that it's active, and now they're back in the store trying to get a loan on the same item again. Well, that's what happened. Somebody didn't ring the sale the majority of the time. The other thing is bogus loans. There's a difference between bogus and fake loans. So a bogus loan is that there's just no loan at all. Employee decides that they need some money, and they said, well, I'll pay it back in a couple of days, and they write a fictitious loan. There's no item even to begin with here. And their thoughts are, in a couple of days when I get paid, I'm going to pay off the loan. Well, a couple of days go by, and they need that money still. No one's ever identified it because at the end of the night, no one walked the loan, or as I refer to as walked the loan, checked the loan. You should, at the end of your day or at the first thing in the morning, verify all the loans and make sure all the loans are there. Make sure all the loans are loan to value. One of the expressions I use is loan to value, price to sell. So you want to make sure from a business point of view that someone is verifying those loans. So if the check and balance is not there, that you're not verifying the loans, you can see where that bogus loan can add into 1, 2, 3, and then numerous bogus loans from there. Several $100,000, depending on how loose the location is and how high the loan balance is. The other thing you might want to look at is what's called fake loans. Fake loan is that there's actually an item there. It's just has no value to it. It's a Walmart gold chain that they just loaded $600 on, and it's not gold. They say it's a electronic device, and you open it up, and in the box is a brick or batteries or something to that nature. Again, it's a fake loan. There's actually an item there, it might be in a box or something like that, but the loan really isn't to the value that it should be, and the name is fictitious because the employee actually needed that money. Or they have a friend come in and they loan them too much on that amount, the loan drops later on, and you find out that it was a bad loan. And at that point you're either thinking, well, the employee just did a bad job, I have to re-educate them, or you're thinking that maybe they've done a lot more. One of the things we do on-site risk assessments. We go out to pawn shops across the United States every week, and we do reviews. One of the things we always look at is your oldest loans in your jewelry section. And why do we do that? Well, because if you're an experienced, if you want to steal, what you could do is you can take an old loan, knowing that customer is always renewing that loan, hasn't come back in 5 years to pick up the loan, just always renews it, pull that loan out, and then re-loan on it. So at the end of the day, now you're checking loans, and you see that there's a loan, and it's a gold chain, and it's perfectly fine. What you didn't realize, though, is it's the gold chain from Mrs. Jones, who's had it in loan for the last 3 to 4 years. So that might be another thing you might want to do and check out. So jewelry sold or loaned in other pawn shops is a good way of indicating. We get a lot of calls that a pawnbroker found out from another pawnbroker that their employee was in their store. We get calls sometimes from someone seeing someone else at a swap meet or a flea market or something like that, selling gold, which is always an indicator. And, I talked about poor jewelry counts. Jewelry should be counted in the morning and should be counted at night. Same people who count the jewelry at night shouldn't be counting the jewelry in the morning, or vice versa. You'll find that a lot of times if you have a system, the system itself will tell you how to do jewelry counts, but periodically somebody else should be doing that and doing those counts to make sure that the jewelry is there. And then the other thing you have to look at is, are there any switch outs going on in the jewelry case? Or is there jewelry that you do not put all the jewelry out? Sometimes pawnbrokers have too much jewelry, so they don't put it all out. So some of the jewelry sits in the back of the store. Well, it's very easy for someone to take that jewelry and switch it out for another piece, and months go by or weeks go by before you realize that you've had a switch out. So are certain areas or neighborhoods more prone to robberies than others? Well, if you look at what a robber's desire is, a robber's desire is to get in and get out, not to get caught. So one of the exposures that you always have to be cognizant is if you own a pawn shop that's on a major highway or off of a road that's easy to get in and easy to get out. If parking is difficult, or pulling up to your store is difficult, and maybe not to the best advantage of a person to rob you unless they have an incentive for whatever reason. If you look at easy in, easy out locations, it's something you might want to be more cognizant. Poorly lit outside areas. Now with daylight saving time coming upon us, it's important that you make sure that your lights are coming on appropriately now that the winter is coming into play. If the location is poorly lit, if someone can easily feel that they can get in and get out, again, I talked about how the parking lot should look. And then the other thing is looking at rural and urban. A lot of times I'll go to a pawn show and I'll speak about robbery awareness, and there'll be people that have locations in the inner city, and then there'll have people that have locations in urban and rural locations. The urban locations have more of a tendency of being robbed. Why? Because there's more people there, and it's more of a challenge. The rural locations, though, have a higher violent rate if they're being robbed. Why? Because a lot of times they're robbed by transients, people who are driving through town, people that don't live in town, people who feel that they can get in and get out as quickly as possible. If you live in an urban environment and you're robbing the local pawn shop or pawn shop in an area, you're probably going to stay in that area. Chances are you live in that city or in that area. So the likelihood of, well, why do I want to be more violent? It goes down a little bit there. Unlike a rural environment where they have nothing to lose, there's really no reason. No one's ever going to know because I'm never going to be in this town again. They feel a little more relaxed being violent. So there's a trade-off between the two locations, between urban and rural. So what kind of technology can assist pawnbrokers in maintaining internal and external security? That's a good question. So we talked a lot about what kind of technology you can use. You know, the checks and balances is the key, and how that technology comes into play is key. You know, does your pawn system allow you to do jewelry counts and enter them into the system to verify that the jewelry is there? Do you do loan counts? You know, do you verify your loans at the end of the day, or periodically do a loan audit of your location without anyone knowing that you were going to do it that day? You know, how does your system help you manage your business? You know, having a system that can probably identify all transactions. You know, believe it or not, there are still locations sometimes that handwrite their pawn tickets, or you know, or really don't have a cash management procedure. You know, how much cash do you start off in the morning? The same amount that I left at night. We just, you know, or periodically I just take cash or something like that. Or, you know, we don't ring all the transactions up because we have a little pizza fund or something like that. Or, you know, if someone comes in and they want to buy a piece of merchandise that's not in your system for whatever reason, we just take the cash and we put it in the drawer, and then we true up at the end of the day. So again, when you set those tones, when you're lax about your store and how it's run, you know, the thing you have to remember as a pawn owner is you care about your store more than anybody else in that location, because it's your store, it's your baby. You have to take care of that store. You're there day in and day out because it's your baby taking care of it. And no one else has that level of loyalty to your company as you do. And you want to be able to foster that as much as possible so that the other pawnbrokers there, the people who work for you, feel that same feeling that you have, that desire to pick up that napkin if it's laying on the floor, or that desire to help that customer in the back corner even if they don't feel like helping them, or the desire to clean the merchandise that's out there even if they're not told. You know, I said the bathroom theory. If I go to your tool section and, you know, you look at the circular saws or the chainsaws, and they still have the wood on it, and they still have the oil on it, and you have it out there for sale. You know, what does that say? You know, why couldn't someone have cleaned that lawnmower and got the grass cuttings out before they put it out for sale? What does that say about the store if I'm a customer or if I'm an employee? So those are the kind of things that you want to continue always to work on. What are the best steps to take or ways to train employees in handling robbery situations? So this is geared for an hour, this webinar. That conversation, probably a 2-hour conversation, so I'm going to do it in 6 minutes, hopefully. So what to do and how to handle robbery situations. It's very important because you don't get a chance to practice that. If it happens at that moment, you better already have your program in place. Robbery awareness is key. That's the most important thing. Being aware of your surroundings, being aware of the potential of a robbery that's occurring, and how to act with that. So what's the number one thing that I always talk about at my robbery awareness training seminars? It's the number one thing, whether you're in a pawn shop in a robbery, whether you're getting out of your car, whether you're walking down the street. The number one thing to do is cooperate. It's the most important thing you can do. Cooperate during a robbery, because the goal is, at the end of the day, to go home. The goal is, in every robbery situation, is to get the robber away from you, out of the store, or wherever you might be, as quickly as possible. So the important thing about that is if you have a buzzer system, you don't want to lock the robber inside the store with a gun while you're inside the store. It's a bad thing to do. You want that robber to be able to leave. It's just money, it's just merchandise. Although it's something you don't want to happen, it's not worth your life. You want to handle a robbery, and a lot of people, when I say this, roll their eyes, as a transaction. Bad guy comes in, pulls a gun, says this is a robbery, give me some money. You tell them, okay, I'm going to open the register drawer. When it opens, the bell's going to ring, just so you know. And Mary's in the back room, in case you hear any noise back there. Okay, I'm opening up the drawer. I'm going to give you the money in the drawer, not the money that's underneath the drawer, not the bank deposit that's sitting on the counter in the back. I've had situations where the robbers come into the store and ask for the money in the register, and after they give them the money in the register, they say, well, do you want the money in the back room? Or do you want the money on the counter? You cooperate and you follow what they're asking you to do. Give me the money in the register. Here's the money in the register. And you hand them the money, and they leave, and you go home that day. So the key there is, like I said, don't be a hero. Go home that day. The last part of it, obviously, is something that we can talk about for another couple hours, and that's what to do with a gun. If you have a gun in your store, some pawnbrokers carry firearms. No issue with them carrying firearms. What I recommend, though, is, again, you want to communicate to a robber that it's not worth them robbing your location. They could go rob someone else because you're not going to change the way they think in life. But you don't want them robbing you. So how do you do that? You send a message from the beginning, like I said. Well-lit parking lot, clean parking lot, cameras when I walk in, customer service from employees when I walk in. And if you're carrying a firearm, let them know you're carrying a firearm. Let them be aware that if they're going to rob your location, they're going to have to deal with you carrying a firearm. It's very important that you understand the goal that I have is for you never to be robbed. Not the goal is to catch robbers or catch people. Your job is to be a pawnbroker, to service customers, to write loans, to service your cash and credit constrained customers, to do sales. Really isn't to catch the bad guys. That's what the police do. Your job is for them not to come into your store to ever begin with. So keeping that in mind. I do not recommend that you keep loaded firearms throughout the store. I'd rather have the person who's got a firearm carry it. And the reason why is if I'm a person and I have a concealed handgun, I've had a Texas concealed handgun permit for 20 years. I feel comfortable if I'm carrying a firearm. But if I'm not carrying that firearm and I'm on the sales floor and I'm cleaning the TVs and my firearm is underneath the register and Mary has access to it. Mary could be anyone. Could be Tom has access to it. And a robber comes in. I don't know if I really want someone who's not committed or trained on how to deal with a firearm now to have my firearm and be pointing it at the robber. And I do not have my firearm on me. So my recommendation is if you do have a firearm and you do carry firearms, that you actually carry the firearm, and then you communicate to people that you actually have firearms and that you carry it. Unfortunately, I've seen situations where it's very difficult for someone to actually use a loaded weapon. You point it at somebody, your desire is to kill that person, and that's a very difficult thing to say to people. If you're going to point the weapon, you better be able to use it, because over my years, I've been to 3 pawnbroker situations where the pawnbroker actually got the drop on the robber and couldn't pull the trigger, and robber shot and killed him, and left the family behind. So I can answer those kind of questions all day long, and obviously if you want to send me more questions about it, by all means, we can address that another time. Okay, getting along. Okay, next question. With the upcoming holiday selling season, are there other security steps that pawnbrokers should take? So, between now and Valentine's Day, this is the busiest time for the pawn industry. We're doing more and more of these site reviews with pawnbrokers as we get closer to the Thanksgiving period, because then it gets crazy after that. One of the things I would recommend that you would do and this is from our site review, is doing on-site lighting reviews. Make sure that all the lights working inside. If not, replace those bulbs. As winter time is coming and it's getting darker quicker out there, or in the morning, make sure that the timers on your outside lighting is working properly. Your camera placement. Take a look at your cameras. A lot of times we'll go to a location and the camera system was really good, except that was 4 years ago, and your sales floor has changed. And the cameras that we're watching, this one particular high-risk area now, is watching lawnmowers. So where are your cameras placed? You'd be surprised if you go back and look at your camera placement. You'll be scratching your head and saying, I have no idea why that camera's pointing the way it is. And maybe we need to adjust that. Your cash management. You're going to be taking in more cash, whether it's loan payouts or whether it's sales. You're going to be taking in more cash. So do more deposits. Go to the bank more, or take the money out of the cash register, like I said, at whatever your maximum amount is, but do more deposits and move that cash out of the register or out of vulnerability, and get it to the bank as quick as you can. It does you no good if you can't pay your bills because you have $40,000 worth of cash in your bank. See that around tax time a lot in some of the states where they do a lot of tax refunds. Do you envision any changes to pawn shop security in the next 5 years? Well, I think that what you'll see, and we're beginning to see that more in the last 5 years, is the business of pawn is changing in some ways, and that is it's becoming more mainstream business, whether it's because of the exposure you see from hardcore pawn on TV or Pawn Stars or any of those other shows that you see on TV, or the acceptance of that. But the business of pawn has changed. I grew up in the New York City area, and when I was asked to come to Easy Pawn in Texas, my envision of a pawn shop was an old fat man sitting behind a metal steel cage smoking a cigar with 2 dogs and a shotgun, and someone walks in who's a crack addict and wants to sell the Rolex that they just took off someone's wrist. So in 20 years, I've had an education about how great this industry is. It is my favorite industry that I work in because I feel like I'm home, and that's what I'm seeing in this industry changing, is that there are more business thinking behind it. There are more specialty pawn shops that cater to customers. There is a more focus on customer service as being a key, and a lot of progressive pawnbrokers who are bringing on new technology, whether it's Bravo or whether it's Craigslist or whether it's lighting, LED lighting or whatever, or how to present their jewelry, or other services like that. I think you'll see more and more internet transactions, which will mean that there'll be more and more internet fraud, shipping fraud. Another avenue where you might want to keep an eye on your employees. We see a lot of dishonest employees who ship out extra boxes or put extra items in boxes and ship it out. How do you get it out of the store? You have a friend buy an item. Now you're going to eBay it, or you're going to sell it on the internet. You box it, you put an extra item in the box, and you ship it to your friend. You don't have to walk out of the store. you don't have to worry about anyone doing any package checks at the end of the night or anyone seeing you walk out of the store. They actually shipped it for you out of the store. So new technology or protocols. Again, our goal is making crooks' lives more difficult. Managing your business is key. How do you make them more difficult? Well, there's a lot of new technology out there. There's global positioning trackers, very successful when it comes to robbers. This is a device that you put in your high-risk areas, your jewelry or your cash. It's very thin. And if someone takes the item, the police are able to track them and make arrests. That happens at least once a month in the pawn industry. I see a lot about that. Smash and grab glasses. Like I said, the laminated glass is key. It's very important. As that continues to rise, I think smash and grabs are going to continue. Robberies last year in the pawn industry were very high, and we're starting to see them trend up again this year here. So I think it's going to be a very high problem robbery situation, depending really on how the election goes. May depend on where everyone reacts to it or whether the economy is good or not. So I think smash and grabs are going to continue, and I don't see them going away quite quickly. I mentioned the how to protect your loans and the importance of protecting your loans. Looking at a pawn safe. For those who haven't never seen a pawn safe, it's a TL-rated safe. The interior has been hollowed out, and inside has been inserted drawers that only one drawer can open at a time. They're on an X amount of delay, whether it's 20 seconds or not. So when you close one drawer, you can only open up the other one. The importance of that is what you do is you're sending a message to the robber that they can't come in your store and in 50 seconds take $200,000 worth of your loans, your jewelry loans, or $100,000. They're going to have to wait, go loan by loan by loan, or drawer by drawer by drawer. And remember, the importance of that is robbers want to get in and they want to get out. They're not there to beat you up. They're not there to be violent. They want money. They want to get in. They want to get out. So sending that message could save you the headache. I still get phone calls sometimes. I'll do a review and the store will not have had that pawn safe, and then unfortunately 6 months later they'll call me and say, hey, you know what, I should have got the pawn safe. I want to get one now. And my answer to them is, why? You don't have any more jewelry. There's really, you can wait on that. You don't have to rush. And it happens. So if you have it, I would strongly recommend it. It's something you want to keep in consideration. And then the last thing I have on my notes is video analytics. Making your job easier is important. Keeping you focused on the core business and how to drive the core businesses. There are video now that does analytics for you. There's a dashboard that can tell you who's done a good loan that you can compliment somebody in, and who's done a questionable loan that you might have issues on. There's video analytics now that can even tell you heat trails. We use them in auto shops in a dealership. And what that does is the video actually tells you where your customer flow is every day. Are they going to one particular case a lot when they walk in? Well, maybe that's where you put your high risk or your valuable items there a little more. So what's the customer flow when it comes to heat analytics? Or again, what is the register telling you? Is there a problem with a transaction? Bravo integrates very nicely with other video analytics, and the two of them together form a pretty formidable force. And again, when you're not there, what's going on? You can look at that by pulling it up on your phone or taking a look at that. So that's important. So it's 50 minutes past the hour. I hope I answered some of the questions that you have. I know that I rushed through a lot of them. I think they were great questions, and if there's any more questions, feel free to reach out for me. My website is sapphirerisk.com. Again, we've been in pawn security for over 20-something years, and we're always interested in any new thefts that are occurring or new procedures that we can learn from. If you have any questions about your shop or anything like that, feel free to give us a call. And I want to thank Bravo for having me and allowing me to do this webinar, and I look forward to talking to people in the future on this subject. Margo, I'm going to turn it back over to you now.
All right. Thank you, Tony, for all that information. That was really great information. Like you said, I didn't see any questions come up in the chat window, but feel free to send your questions to the email here on the screen, and he will be sure to respond. If we get a lot of questions, we can always do another follow-up webinar as well. And I have been recording this, so I'll make sure to send out the recording so you can share with the rest of your team members as well. And thanks again for joining the webinar, and be sure to send your questions to Tony so we can answer those for you. Have a great day.